Welcome back. Until I think of another topic in mythology to talk about, I thought I'd do a short, fun little video on uh, myths and movies. These are movies that are I've accumulated over the years that are based on myths and legends. Uh, I remember many years ago. I don't own this movie, but I remember years ago when I was really learning about teaching myself a lot about Greek mythology. Uh, I was in the video rental store. For those of you not old enough, there used to be these stores where you could rent movies, and they were on videotape. And I came across a version of the Odyssey called Ulysses with Kirk Douglas, and Kirk Douglas recently just died, and but he played Ulysses, and it was actually not a bad movie. It actually had a really good scene with Polyphemus, the Cyclops, and how Odysseus or Ulysses blinded him, made him drunk first and blinded him. So that's an interesting movie where Douglas called Ulysses, which is based on the Odyssey. The rest of the movies I'm going to talk about, I have in my collection. I've collected over the years. The first one is actually based on one of my favorite books, one of my favorite epics, the Song of the Nibelungs. The Song of the Nibelungs. This is a story of Siegfried and Kriemhild and the slaying of the dragon and the great treasure called the Nibelung hoard, and how Siegfried was betrayed and how Kriemhild sought vengeance against her family, the Burgundians who killed him. So that's told in the Song of the Nibelungs. And I actually have them. Fritz Lang, many years ago, he made black and white silent movies, and he's the guy who made Metropolis, the movie with the evil female robot. But he also, a lot of people don't know that he also took the Song of the Nibelungs and made them into two movies. The first, part one, is Siegfried, which tells the first half of the story, and it's centered around the hero Siegfried. And the second one deals with the second part of the story, Kriemhild's revenge. I don't know. I guess you could stream these today, hopefully, but it's not. It's actually a pretty faithful rendition of the Song of the Nibelungs. I think it's very well done. I like Siegfried a little bit better. I think it has more variety, whereas Kriemhild's Revenge I thought was a little, I thought dragged a little bit. But anyway, if you like old German black and white films, I recommend this. Okay. Next book I'm going to recommend is this movie a lot of people didn't like, but I thought it was amazing. Beowulf, the version with Angelina Jolie playing Grendel's mother. I mean, it used real actors, but it also used CGI, and it's. But I thought it was pretty amazing. I thought it had great visuals. I thought it had. I mean, it uses the story of Beowulf, which is a great story. It takes liberties with the story. The biggest liberty is the fact that whereas Beowulf, I have the book right here. Whereas the original story of Beowulf, which goes back to the 8th century A.D. and it's in Old English, is Beowulf is an interesting character if you read the original book. He doesn't seem to have that fatal flaw, that tragic flaw that heroes have. He seems to be almost perfect, and superhuman. Whereas the movie Beowulf, which was, I think, released around 2007, 2008. It's interesting in that Beowulf was transformed into a very flawed human, and it leads to him making various mistakes. So that's the biggest change. But apart from that, I think it's a lot of fun. I like the fact that Angelina Jolie plays the shape shifting monster, and it's got the monster Beowulf, and it has the dragon, and the dragon scene at the end is just out of this world. Give it a try. You may not like it, but I think it's worth seeing. Another movie. This is absolutely one of my favorite movies of all time. period, it doesn't matter whether or not it's based on mythology, is getting into King Arthur territory. It's a movie called Excalibur. Okay, this movie is pretty old. It goes back to the 80s. And it's directed by John Boorman. And this is, of course, the story of King Arthur. It's not the complete story of King Arthur. This King Arthur stories can go on and on and on forever. There's so many side stories to King Arthur, but I just thought this. There's a lot of movies based on King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Everybody's got their favorites. This one I really like, Excalibur. According to the credits, it's based mainly on, I think he says it's, according to the director, it's based mainly on Sir Thomas Malory's book, Les Mortes d'Arthur. I happen to have a copy here. I read this many years ago. I have a 2-volume set. I have the Penguin 2-volume. Les Mortes, this is volume 1, volume 2, and Les Mortes d'Arthur by Sir Thomas Malory. And you could see it's pretty damn long. So this, about 1,000 pages. So this movie is not going to cover near it. And it also takes a lot of liberties, and it changes things. I wouldn't say it's a very faithful rendition of Mallory's story in any way, but who cares? It's a fun story. It's generally based around King Arthur. It has his knights. It's got Guinevere. It's got Lancelot. It's got the love affair between Guinevere and Lancelot. It's got Merlin. It's got the Sword and Stone. It's got the Holy Grail. It's got all the King Arthur stuff. So I definitely think it's worth seeing. Another King Arthur movie, which was made a little more recently, I think back in the 2000s, is this movie with who's the guy that's in this? Owen something, well, whatever. Keira Knightley is in this. King Arthur. It's this movie didn't get as much love, but I actually thought it was very interesting. What's interesting about this movie is that it's not really based on the myths of King Arthur. It's based on, they tried to make a movie which was a little more based on what they thought was history. What happens is that it's believed King Arthur goes back to the time when the Romans pulled out of Great Britain, around, I think, late 400s, early 500s AD. It was the time where the various Germanic tribes were trying to get into Great Britain, and the Celts were trying to protect themselves from these incoming Saxons, and so it doesn't really follow much the myths and legends we know about King Arthur. It's basically a story about a king and who's trying to protect the realm that has been left by the Romans and trying to keep it safe from the incoming Saxons. And I actually think it's a pretty good movie. But like I said, it tries to be a little more historical rather than following the myths and legends. The next video this is a classic. I think it goes back to the 60s. Jason and the Argonauts. This is one of those old Ray Harryhausen movies. He's the guy that was specialized in stop motion photography. He did the Sinbad movies, like the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. But this is the movie that's based on basically Jason and the Argonauts, which is primarily based on this book here called The Voyage of Argo, also known as the Argonautica. And but of course Jason and the Argonauts is not only in this book, but it's in other writings that go back to the ancient Greeks. But the big book is The Voyage of Argo, and in the movie's Jason and the Argonauts. So it's a story of the Golden Fleece and how he gets the Golden Fleece and he has to fight the dragon and the king that's guarding the fleece, and there's a great battle at the end where he fights the men who rose from the teeth, but instead of being warriors, they're actually skeletons. It's kind of a pretty cool scene at the end. So this is a really classic fun movie. another movie, and this one is actually based more on the story of Perseus and Pegasus and Andromeda, and that's the classic. I think this is Ray Harryhausen again. Also, I'm not sure, but it definitely uses that stop motion photography. It's Clash of the Titans. It's really cheesy in a lot of ways. It's. I remember my classics teacher calling it a silly movie, and it is silly. But who the hell cares? It's fun. This is the one that's got that mechanical owl in it, and they made a remake of this not that long ago, Clash of the Titans, and they didn't use the owl, which I was very disappointed. But the mechanical owl Boo Boo is actually used in this movie, and it roughly tells the story of Perseus and how he kills Medusa, the Gorgon with the snakes for hair, and so this is, yeah, Clash of the Titans, a lot of fun. Now the next few movies I'm going to mention briefly, they don't really tell a particular myth, okay, but they're mythological in nature, in motifs and feeling and characters, and I'm going to go through them pretty briefly. One of them, my all-time favorite, is this movie called forgot it. I got it for $9.99. Forgot to take that off. It's a movie called Dragonslayer. This is a pretty old movie. It goes back to the late '70s. It's basically a dragon slaying story. Of course, it's called Dragonslayer. The main hero, though, instead of being your typical knight, he's actually a wizard, and it stars a very young Peter McNichol. You may know him from the show Numbers, and he was in what else was he in? He was in Numbers. He was in the Mr. Bean movie. He was in Ghostbusters 2. Yeah, and various other Ally McBeal. So he plays a wizard in training who is stuck having to fight a dragon that's terrorizing this town. What's really interesting about this movie is that even with today's special effects that have advanced, especially in Game of Thrones, I don't think there's still something about the dragon in this that still is my favorite. There's still a magic about the dragon in this movie that, to me, is better than all the fancy CGI. And it's a great dragon slaying adventure. It has kings. It's got wizards. It's got baby dragons. It's got princesses. It's just a great little movie. Let's see what else I got here. Here's an interesting movie, Legend. Yeah, Legend. This is a fun movie. It has Tom Cruise. I know it's Tom Cruise. I know. Why do you want to watch a Tom Cruise movie? But he was really young here, and he wasn't half as crazy as he is now. So this is actually a fun movie. It's got magic. It has witches. It has an evil devil-like main bad guy. It has that's him over here, the bad guy, and it's got goblins and fairies, and it's just a kind of a fairy tale of a movie, Legend. Let's see, another movie, Willow. This is a classic that goes back to the '80s. It's actually, is it Steven Spielberg? I think it's Lucas. It's from legendary filmmakers George Lucas and Ron Howard. George Lucas and Ron Howard. This is a fun, really great little fantasy movie with magic, and Willow plays a dwarf who goes on an adventure, and it has a. Let's see. It's got a young Val Kilmer in it, and if you haven't seen this, it's a great little adventure story with a lot of magic and good versus evil and some great fight scenes. It's just if you want to see a fairy tale adventure movie with magic and stuff and monsters, you can't beat it. It's just really, really good. Another favorite of mine, Shrek. Everybody's seen this. I probably don't even have to mention this. Everybody knows Shrek. But I just have to mention it in case you never see it. Shrek is great. It's again mythological in feeling. It doesn't tell a specific story, but it's got a princess. It's got an ogre. It has some magic. It's got a dragon. It's got a talking donkey. So it's definitely mythological in nature. So if you haven't seen Shrek, I'm sure you have, but just in case, I think you should see it. One last movie. I'm almost embarrassed to mention this movie because it's the height of cheese, and it's actually an awful movie, but I'm going to mention it anyway. It's called Xanadu with Olivia Newton-John. Now, why do I mention this? Not very mythological, this movie. But the reason why I mention this is because there is a little mythology in it. Olivia Newton-John plays a muse. Yes, one of the 9 muses that represent different arts and crafts, arts and sciences of Greek myth. She actually plays a muse that comes down to Earth to basically inspire this young artist who wants to be successful. And it goes back to 1980. I guess I have a sentimental attachment to this movie because, I was still pretty young in 1980. I still have hair, and this is still just it's such a pleasant, sweet, fun little movie. It's a musical. It has music both from not only Olivia Newton-John, but also Electric Light Orchestra. So if you really like ELO, you'll like this movie anymore. Again, it's a lighthearted, silly little movie. I only mention it because, like I said, she plays a muse. And there's even a little appearance by Zeus and Hera, although they don't really make an appearance. You just hear their voices in the movie. So anyway, so that's my little list of movies. And until I think of something else to talk about, I'll get back into more serious myths and legends in the future. Happy watching.